chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot. The first Mishnah we'll be studying is, I think, my favorite one of the entire Mishnah, the entire Pirkei Avot. It's a very powerful one. But first, let's just read the Omer for today, which is the 30th day of the counting of the Omer, which means Lag BaOmer is coming up in just a few days. Thursday night, you're all invited to the parking lot of Chabad, where we will have barbecue and burgers and hot dogs and all the trimmings.
Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer.
Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer. We have a big party. So today, which is 3 days before, we have the, what do you say?
What time is it?
At 6 p.m.
Which day?
And on Thursday night. So on Thursday evening, 6 p.m. And we'll have barbecue. It'll be like around 7:30-ish, which is just by a little bit before sundown. We're going to make a bonfire in a fire pit, and we're going to sing some songs also. So start at 6. If you're
any good l'chaim?
For Thomas, for you, we'll have the best. Best. And so anyway, let's just read the Omer. The 30th day of the Omer, which was today, which are 4 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. It's discipline within humility. And it goes like this. Humility must be disciplined and focused. When should my humility cause me to compromise? And when should it not? You don't want to be treated like a shmata, but you have to be humble. So when you have to have discipline in your humility. In the name of humility, do I sometimes remain silent and neutral in the face of wickedness? Another aspect of gevura avot, which is the discipline in humility, humility must include respect and awe for the person or experience before whom you stand humble. Finally, if my humility is wanting, is it because I don't respect another? And the exercise for the day is focus on your reluctance to commit in a given area and see if it originates from a healthy, humble place. So if you're reluctant to jump into an area, is it coming from a place of humility, a healthy place, or not? Okay, that is the Omer count for the day. And now let's get to...
I decided to give myself an A in humility.
Good one, Thomas.
He's kidding, of course.
That is good. I like that. Okay, I'll be sharing my screen and we'll dig into chapter 4. Okay, since Thomas, you are the wise one tonight, you will start with who is a wise person. Let me just zoom in a little bit. A little more. It's a really nice paragraph. There's a lot of verses that it uses to prove, but there's 4 main categories that we're going to be learning about 4 different types of people in chapter 4, Mishnah 1. And Thomas, take it away.
Sure. Ben Zoma says, who is truly wise? Someone who learns from every person. As it says in Psalms, I have gained wisdom from all my teachers, because God's testimonies, the Torah, is my only concern in conversation. So I will learn from anyone who can teach me something. Who is truly strong? Someone who conquers his inclination. As it says in Proverbs, someone who can control himself and is slow to get angry is better than someone who is physically strong, and someone who controls his feelings is better than someone who conquers a city. Who is truly rich? Someone who is happy with his portion. As it says in Psalms, when you're satisfied to eat food bought with money earned by the work of your hands, and don't seek more than you have, you are fortunate and it will be good for you. The words, you are fortunate, refer to good fortune in this world. And the words, it will be good for you, refer to goodness in the world to come. Who is truly honored? Someone who honors other people. As God says, to those who honor me by honoring my creations, I will cause honor. And those who ridicule me by disrespecting my creations will be shamed.
Amazing. All right, I'll give everyone just a moment to let this Mishnah sink in. And then we'll carry on with the rest of the chapter as much as we can. But I do want to focus on this Mishnah a little bit, just because it's such a powerful Mishnah. How could you read this and not be inspired? So we'll give everyone a moment, and then we'll dig into it with some commentary. Okay, so our Mishnah is dealing with 4 different areas which offers insights into 4 important areas of life: wisdom, which is what Thomas started with, power, strength, wealth, and honor. But there's a common denominator, each one, although each one is different, but each of these areas, the Torah's view, which is highlighted in this Mishnah, is different from the view that you would have from common perception of how you would expect it. Let's take wisdom, for example. In the common perception, you could see a teacher and you have a student. The teacher is the one that you expect with greater knowledge. That's the common perception. And the wiser, the more knowledgeable a person is, the less they think they need to learn from anyone else because they have the wisdom. But over here, the first part, who is truly wise, the Torah's model is the reverse. The truly wise person is the one that finds something that they can learn from every person, including those who may seem inferior to them in knowledge. That's the first part. The next one was, who is truly strong? Power. We usually think of a powerful person as someone who their will is imposed on other people's. A weak person is someone who lacks the ability to impose their will. The Torah's idea of power is the exact opposite. A truly powerful person is someone who could restrain themselves, someone with inner strength to control their own impulses. Like we learned in Tanya on our Wednesday morning class, that's a strong person, that they could conquer their inclination, they control their impulse. They don't impose their will. In fact, they control their will. Wealth, the common perception is the more money a person has in their bank account, that's the stronger, the wealthier a person is. An oversized ambition that drives them to have more money and more possession. The Torah's idea of wealth is the opposite. Someone who's satisfied with what they have, regardless of how much or how little they have. And finally, honor. I found this to be so beautiful. Honor usually is understood as the product of what a person has achieved, and wisdom in the other 3 categories: wisdom, power, wealth. Depending on how much you have, that will choose the honor you'll get in synagogue, where you will sit. In certain synagogues, the wealthiest people sit on the east side, all the way up front, because they have more power, they have more wealth, they have more connections. But over here, so naturally, it would seem that it would make sense that the reverse, a person who's poor, a person who's foolish, doesn't get much honor. Over here, the Torah's idea of honor is opposite. A truly honored person is a person who respects others, including or even especially those who are inferior to them. Like Thomas ended by saying, they honor other people. Someone who honors other people, meaning people that perhaps don't even deserve their honor, but they're really getting it. So I find this to be teachings over here is so beautiful in each one. We'll get a little bit more. Anyone have comments on that before we continue? Just how to see the Torah's model is the reverse of how you would have expected. I just find that to be interesting. I just find this paragraph to be very powerful.
No, I agree with you. I think there really is a lot to unpack here, and it really philosophically does go against the way a lot of people may behave. But I find something very centering about this. I think all these things take us back into a much more centered place, where in some cases you even take yourself out of the equation a little bit. Beautiful. If that makes sense. We can't. We all have to kind of re-examine what it means to be powerful, and in a way, it kind of takes us back to kind of the animalistic self. We think of power as like a dog will posture and growl and stuff, and some people do that. They do a lot of posturing with, they show their possessions, they talk about what the money they have and so on, and it's kind of a very animalistic show of power that isn't something that you're not really in control of it either. It's just posturing. It's very superficial.
Nice. Thank you, Thomas. And we'll see over here, the word for a wise person is a chacham. A scholar a person who's studious in Torah study, is known as a Talmid Chacham. A student, literally, it would mean a wise student or a student of wisdom. And I think that's more the literal term. A Talmid Chacham is a student of wisdom. What I love about that is, as a commentary from the 16th century, Rabbi Shmuel of Osida, he says, you can never separate the word student from the word wise. A Talmid Chacham, a student of wisdom, goes together, which means the moment a person stops thinking of themselves as a student, they can no longer be called wise. It goes together. A wisdom is when you're always a student, you're always looking to learn from other people, which is what really the first lesson of Ben Zoma is teaching us here. Another thing that's interesting is you should be able to learn from every person. Every person includes even people that are less than are inferior to you or less than perfect and appropriate in their behavior. So really the question would be, what is Ben Zoma teaching us to learn from them? If we're able to learn from every person, if a person has bad qualities, bad character traits, what exactly are we supposed to be learning from them? So there's different ways of, I would love to hear anyone's perspective, but there's different ways of how to understand this. One of them is you're supposed to learn how not to behave from seeing how they are, learn how not to behave. That's one way of learning. The Baal Shem Tov actually teaches your fellow, this is a beautiful teaching, your fellow is your mirror. If your face is clean, the image you encounter will also be flawless. But if the image you see in the other person is dirty and you see a blemish, a flaw in the other person, it's really your own imperfection that you are seeing just in a mirror of someone else. But really it's a flaw that you have to deal with inside. So from this perspective, when you see other people as inferior to you, you still have to learn because there's something in there that you're like, wait a minute, if I see a flaw in them, it's something actually that it's teaching me that I have to improve also within myself. Another way of understanding it is when you see someone that's less than you, inferior to you, you have to find a way to exploit a negative trait, but in a positive way. For example, I'll just give you some sources from the Talmud, which are really well sourced. One is from Bava Basra, which is actually the longest tractate of the Talmud, where it says it condemns envy, jealousy, envy, as a negative and a destructive feeling, which means we have to stay away from envy. But it also declares in the Talmud, it says, and we know that actually from the Ten Commandments, right, not to be jealous. But the Talmud, it says that envy amongst Torah scholars increases wisdom. Because you say, that person understood it, it motivates you to try to understand it better. It's almost like a kosher quality of envy. Not as if envy is ever a good thing, but you could exploit a negative trait in a positive way of understanding it. Or here's a beautiful one more from a Hasidus perspective. The Rebbe taught it and the Rebbe quoted it from different Hasidic sources, that pride and arrogance is like something that you have to stay the farthest away from. Not to be arrogant and boastful and too proud of yourself. It's something that could lead to danger. But at the same time, when a person does have that trait, if they come across a temptation that they have, they're like, wait a minute, I should do that? I'm so much greater than that. How could I fall so low? So even though it's a place of arrogance, but it's exploiting a negative trait in a positive view by saying, wait a minute, me? I should fall and do something that petty? I'm way above that. So even though it's almost coming from a place of arrogance, it's benefiting it in a positive way. A cute story, it was actually in the commentary of last week's Torah portion in our synagogue edition of our Chumash. It's a beautiful Chumash that we use here on Shabbos. And in it, the Torah portion of Kedoshim, which was this past Shabbat, it spoke about the prohibition of not to steal. Now, it's interesting, in the same words, lo tignovu, which is do not steal, was actually already mentioned in the book of Exodus in the Ten Commandments. So right away, Rashi comments that in the Ten Commandments, that was a commandment of not to kidnap, not to steal people. In our Torah portion, this past Shabbat, it was the commandment not to steal possession, property or money. So in that commentary, it actually learns from a great Hasidic master whose name was Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli. Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli was a giant. but so humble. He was such a giant that when the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, wanted to print the Tanya, he actually, and if it's okay with him, I'll just stop sharing for a few moments, just as you can see my face a little better this way. The Alter Rebbe quotes from the Tanya. When the Alter Rebbe printed the Tanya, he wanted to make sure it's approved by very respected and leading figures of his generation. So one of the approbations of the book of the Tanya, which is such a giant book, we've been studying it for a few years together on Wednesday mornings. One of the approbations, the approvals of the book, is from Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli. So this great Hasidic master, a disciple of the Maggid and a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, he says that even from a thief, I could learn positive character traits. Even from someone so negative, he's a thief, he's stealing. But he says, I learned 7 things from a thief. And I have them written out over here. He says, a thief, what he does, he keeps it to himself. You have to learn from that. Not everything you have to post, and some things you keep to yourself. He's willing to take risks to attain his goal. He is meticulously careful with all the particulars of his operation, regardless of whether it's a major component or a small detail. He's so careful with it. So many times, an exciting mitzvah, we go all out. A small petty one, we kind of just brush on the side, and we learn from a thief that even the small details, we have to be so meticulous with. Number 4, he invests great effort in what he does. Number 5, he works swiftly. He's not lazy. He gets the job done quickly. He's always optimistic. He always thinks he could get away with it. And if he fails the first time, he keeps coming back another time. So this is what we learned from a thief. The Rebbe actually teaches this in the Hayom Yom, which is a daily thought that the Rebbe had compiled in the 1940s. So he writes this from Rebbe Zusha of Anipoli. So anyway, that's just a few perspectives of how to learn from people who are perhaps inferior, and you really shouldn't be learning from their style, but there are things that you could still learn and exploit negative character traits in a positive way. Does anyone have any comments on this? Anything that comes to mind? Cheryl, what did you think of this, of Reb Zusha of Anipoli, this lessons to learn from a thief? Does it make sense?
I love it. I love that I've been studying Musar, and it says every person is holy. And so if that is true, every person has a holy soul. And so they can all turn back to behaving well. And I think I read, I don't remember if it was I've been looking through the book, the little booklet that you gave me for the first time, really. And I read all the, many of the earlier weeks that I missed.
Nice.
And one of the, all of a sudden my brain stopped. I lost it.
Sure,
Anyway,
no problem. Yeah, that's good. The counting of the Omer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I really
Debbie, does anything come to mind when you hear this about negative character traits within people and trying to focus on the positive? Or Adrian, is anything?
Oh, it was a podcast.
Oh,
that I
nice.
listened to.
Awesome.
And you were talking about, oh gosh, I can't even remember now. It keeps going in and out of my brain. I'm tired, so forgive me.
No, that's fine. Sure. I'm sure you had a long day.
Pull it out.
I'm sorry, what?
Go ahead.
I think in a way we kind of doubt Hashem when we aren't humble. And because I think we have a tendency to define who we are in very specific terms. And I've known really quite a few people who have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, and we hold on to these things. And we hold on to them because we don't believe that from the beginning we're good enough as we really are. And we're closed off to learning from other people because, we've become suddenly set in a very specific way of thinking. Again, because we don't think that from the core that we were good enough. And we strive to somehow, through our accomplishments, through the wealth and everything else, we strive to, it's like we're trying to fill a void in a way. We're not starting off from a place of, does that make sense? We're not starting off from a place of saying, I'm really okay.
Yeah.
And if you really, really believe that, if you really believe that Hashem made you to be the best you can be to begin with, then it takes on a whole new meaning to all these things that you do, and you're not overly attached to them, and that leaves you open to learning from the thief and everybody else.
It's so beautiful, Thomas, because that idea where if they seem inferior, it's only an external thing, but deep down, they have a neshama, they have a soul that makes them in such a positive way, and you have to dig deep to find that, both within you, for a person who looks at themselves as repulsive, sometimes, God forbid, or within someone else. Sometimes you see character traits and you're like, I don't want nothing to do with this person. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll see a shining soul, and you're inherently good and positive.
Yeah.
I like that.
I
like
find
that.
some of the coolest people sometimes. I'm a weird person, so I get to know all the cashiers at my local nugget store, and I know their names, and people start telling you things. And
Right. By the way, Nugget especially, they're actually really nice there. They're
super nice, but
yeah.
honestly, you meet some of the coolest people just in everyday life if you just talk to everybody. I mean, it can be the janitor, it can be whoever it is, and
Beautiful.
And people have some of the most amazing life experiences if you just kind of dig past just the fluffy surface stuff.
Nice.
Actually,
I'll share a story from the Talmud along these lines. It's kind of the opposite of the experience you're having. There was a great sage. His name was Rabbi Elazar. He was the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whose yahrzeit is on Lag BaOmer. He's the star of the day. His son, who was a giant, his name was Rabbi Elazar. And he was coming from a city in Israel in the north called Migdal Gedor, and where his teacher lived. And he was riding leisurely back home on the road on his donkey. He was happy and elated because he was just coming from a great Torah teaching. And riding way next to him, it's almost like if lanes in the freeway, but riding on the donkey right next to him was another person. And Rabbi Elazar looks at him and he tells these words to him. Shalom, the person riding next to him said, Shalom Alecha Rabbi. Hello. But Rabbi Elazar looked at him and he says these words. He says it in Hebrew. I'll translate it in English. He says, empty one. Look how mean of a comment on the donkey he tells him. How ugly is this person? Are all the people in your city this ugly? That's what Rabbi Elazar is telling this poor guy riding on a donkey next to him. The man replied, the story continues, the man replies, and to the question, are all the people in your city this, so ugly? He says, I do not know. But go and tell the craftsman who made me, go and tell him how ugly is your vessel that you made. Meaning, saying, go to God and tell God that he made ugly creations. Don't come to me. Go to the craftsman. Lech leuman she'asani. Go to the craftsman that made me. Rabbi Elazar at that moment realized he made a mistake. He did something wrong. He was mean. He dismounted from his donkey. He prostrated himself in front of the man and he said, please forgive me, accept my words of forgiveness. And the man replied, I won't forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and tell him, how ugly is the vessel that you made? Go to God and critique God on his craftsmanship. Rabbi Elazar kept walking beside him until he reached the city. And the fellow citizens came out and saw the great Rabbi Elazar, such a great sage. And they started welcoming him and honoring him. And the guy who was ugly said, why are you addressing him with such respect? And they said, this is the great man. So the man said, if this is the teacher of Israel, let there be no more like them. These shouldn't be the teachers of Israel for using such harsh words. So the people of the city said, why are you so mean against him? What did he do? And he said, this is what he said. How ugly I am. So the citizens of the city said, please forgive him. He's a holy man. He's a rabbi. Let him accept his forgiveness. And the man answered to the citizens, I will accept his forgiveness on your behalf, but on one condition, that he never speaks this way again to anyone. To which Rabbi Elazar learned his lesson. He accepted the condition, and he right away gave a very famous statement that's quoted in the Talmud. A person should always be bendable, pliant, like a reed.
Yeah.
and don't be stiff and hard like a cedar.
Mm.
That's the story. Harsh story, heavy duty story. So initially, the thoughts I would have is Rabbi Elazar using such harsh words is unbecoming of a rabbi, of a teacher of Torah, so especially someone on that caliber. He obviously wasn't talking about a crooked nose or puffy eyes that he saw in the man that he struck as ugly. It was more he saw in him a spiritual ugliness, an emptiness in that person that perhaps he was actually fully deserving of the rabbi's condemnation. Maybe the rabbi was able to see something in his heart and his soul that was so disgusting. And yet, Rabbi Elazar learned his lesson and begged him for forgiveness. Because when he saw, when he heard the response of the man saying, "Go to the craftsman," he saw that even someone on that caliber, as inferior as this person, was still saying, "I have a connection with God. Don't come to me. Go to my Creator. Go to God." He's the exemplar of divine goodness. So Rabbi Elazar realized he should have seen him for the qualities of positive that he had coming from God, rather than seeing him for the negative traits or repulsive attitude or insides that he has. And I find that to be so powerful. Like Thomas was saying, you should always, a person may have negative traits or positive traits, but dig deeper and you'll find something beautiful. Start a conversation with them and you'll learn something. You'll learn something new. But if you just from the externals outside say, "Oh, I can't learn anything. I don't like the way he's dressed, or I don't like the car that they drive," and I'm struck so often where I could pass judgment and expect a certain attitude from a person, and it's so different.
Yeah.
And I used to always think it's just like interesting things. As someone with a lot of tattoos and is an Oakland Raiders fan, he's probably a certain style. But there's some of the biggest mentions I know are those people that have earrings and men that seem so on the outside, but I learned so much, and we learned just from having conversations with people how wrong we could be, and sometimes you're in a place where you have to beg for forgiveness because you just had no idea.
Yeah, some of these biker dudes that you see sometimes, I mean,
Exactly.
but they are not as tough as it seems. They're amazing people a lot of the time. They're very warm-hearted. They give you the shirt off their back. They're amazing. But one quick thing I want to say, I've had a weird experience in my life. I'll try to keep this really quick.
Sure.
Some of the people I had some of the deepest relationships with were people I didn't like the first or second time I met them. It's the weirdest thing. Like I have one really good friend of mine right now that I met several years ago, and I just didn't like the guy. I just flat out didn't. And then through a series of circumstances, so you have to always stay open, and you just don't know. You have to. There's always.
Learning from everyone. Beautiful. Well said. Well said. All right. Is everyone ready to go on to the next Mishnah?
Yep.
Let's do it. Let's see. Shira, would you like to read?
Sure. Can you do the finger thing?
Here we go. Mishnah 2.
I can't do anything.
Okay. Mishnah 2. Ben Azai says, "Run. Do even an easy small commandment and run away from any sin, because one commandment, no matter how small, brings about another commandment, and one sin brings about another sin. For the reward for a commandment is the opportunity to do another commandment, and the result of a sin is the possibility of doing another sin."
I love this. But first of all, this is a famous, there's a song, Mitzvah Goreret Mitzvah. We do a family Shabbat before COVID for kids, and our guitar player, he always sings the song. But I like what I find so beautiful is the reward of a commandment, the reward of doing a mitzvah is the opportunity to do another mitzvah. One mitzvah, you get in the mode, your rhythm, you start giving charity, you do more mitzvahs, another mitzvah comes your way. You're more sensitive to mitzvahs, you're more open to it. It just comes along your path. On the other hand, when you do a sin, that kind of goes down your path also. It kind of, when you get angry, it leads to gossiping, and one thing leads to another. Before you know it, it's not just one avera that you did, it could be other ones as well. Okay. Ben Azai, Mishnah 3. Debbie, do you want to read that one? Or is it zoomed in enough, or do you want me to zoom in a little more?
I can say it. Did you say 3?
Yeah, exactly.
Ben, as I would often say, do not treat anyone with disrespect and do not reject anything as valueless, because there is no man who does not have his hour when he is needed. And there is nothing that does not have its valuable place and purpose in the world.
I love this. This is beautiful. I don't know. Is this a selfish? He's saying respect everyone because you may come to need them. Everyone has their time, and you may be in a place where you're going to need them years later. So be kind to them because it may come back to you. You may be in a place where you're going to need them. Is that what he's saying? Do not reject anything as valueless, because there is no man who does not have his hour. In the Mishnah, I'm peeking in another book at the same time. It has such a cool story. It's a story from the Talmud, and it's a story of another Rabbi Elazar. This Rabbi Elazar, his name was Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and he was in Israel walking. This was more in the northern part of Israel, and he saw a sorry-looking person on the side of on the beach in the north of Israel, and he was the lone survivor of a shipwreck. He didn't have any clothing on him. He was lost, and he was begging a passerby for help. And he says, "I'm Roman. I'm a descendant of our great uncle Esav, who was Jacob's twin brother. Help me, give me clothing." But everyone ignored him. They laughed at him. He smelled. They gave him nothing. And he cursed them. He says, "May your entire nation suffer your fate." And Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua hurried to his side and helped him and brought him food and gave him coats and clothing to wear. And the man vowed never to forget the entire episode, to be kind to him and to be angry to the other people that were mean to him. Years later, this shipwreck survivor became a king, the Roman emperor. And he made a decree that all Jewish men should be killed and all Jewish women should be taken as captives. The Jews put together a present to appease the king. They had no idea who he was when he was younger. And they begged Rabbi Elazar to go to the king, he was their leader, to go to the king and beg mercy on their behalf. And he told them they deserve to be killed for how they treated me years before. They recognized each other. And Rabbi Elazar said, here, let me find the words. He still asked on merit for me saving you. I'm asking you for you to save them. And anyway, the king relented and he says, "I'm going to save them on behalf of, in merit of you." But he told them, may they never act this way again. And they taught a powerful lesson. And I just find it a similar thing over here, that you may never know who you're going to come to need. And everyone has their time to shine. Interesting. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Cheryl, would you like to read Mishnah 4? Zoom in a little more, maybe. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl, you're muted.
Rabbi Levitus of Yavne says, "Be very, very humble, because although a person's soul lives forever, the expected end for his body, that which causes arrogance, is in the grave with worms."
The mission is very into worms, right?
Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says, "Whoever desecrates and brings dishonor to God's name, even in a private small group, will be punished for it in public. In regards to desecrating God's name, it makes no difference whether it was done by mistake or on purpose, because either way, God's name was dishonored."
Uh-huh. Interesting. Anything comes to mind, Cheryl, on this Mishnah?
I have to read. I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
says, be very humble, because although a person's soul lives forever, the expected end for his body, that which causes arrogance, is in the grave with worms. So don't be arrogant, because you'll be with worms one day anyway. Did I get that right?
I think so.
Even the learned end up in the grave with the worms.
And the next one, I like the next one, that even if you feel like you're only dishonoring God in a small setting, it's going to come back to you in a public setting. A person will be humiliated or punished in a public setting. And finally, the third one, if you're desecrating God's name, it makes no difference if it was by mistake or on purpose. Okay, some interesting ones over there. Anyone have anything to share on this one?
What exactly do they mean by desecrating God's name?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that. And what would you answer, Adrian? What would you think?
That was my question.
So it's interesting. In Hebrew, the term for it is chilul Hashem. That's not the term over here. It's kol hamechalel, which means whoever desecrates God's name. Chilul Hashem could mean anything as stealing, cheating the government, or being put on the news for anything else similar to that. It's desecrating God's name. And even if you do it privately, just in front of a few people, only a few people saw or know, it's eventually you're going to be punished for it in public. I think that's what it means. Desecrating God's name is people could sanctify God's name by looking at you and saying, wow, the Jewish people are so honest, so loyal, so genuine, menschlich. Or people could look and say, ugh, the Jewish people, that's what they do. You're the God's people, that's what they do. So God's name could be desecrated by your actions. Is that would that make sense, Adrian, to you?
Yeah, it does.
Anyone else have another way of understanding desecrating? I don't think there's a comment over here.
I guess I was thinking using God's name in vain or something. Idol worship or something. I don't know. That's what came to mind for me.
Desecrating God's name would be like prayer, like using God's name in vain. Desecrating God's name.
I don't know. That's just what popped into my head at first.
Or the story you just told about the rabbi who said, the man was not, he was ugly.
Yeah.
I also think about like erasing Hashem's name, taking his name in vain, saying his name accidentally when you should be saying Hashem, that kind of thing. So I think about that in terms of desecration. Anyway.
So it's interesting. I'm looking at the comments, and it goes through both of what we've just been saying. So, Adrian, to answer your question, one of the comments, I like this one. He was known as the Meiri. His name was actually Menachem. If I'm not mistaken, he lived in the 17th century. He was a big Talmudic commentator, but he has a commentary on the Mishnah. He says this refers to a person about desecrating God's name, who acts immorally. This is someone who desecrates God's name in secret, in private. So he says this is talking about someone who acts immorally with a brazen disregard for God. Such a person desecrates God's name and denies God's presence far more than one who admits he is wrong, but just cannot control his passions. So listen, we all make mistakes. He can't control himself. But someone has a brazen disregard for God. He's almost saying, I don't believe God's right here with me. That's called desecrating God's name. That's how he understands it. And then this question, another comment, this is Rabbeinu Yonah. He suggests that how is it possible to desecrate God's name in secret, in private? He says the Mishnah refers to a person who swears falsely and use God's name wrongly, meaning in the olden days when they would take oaths in court, they would use God's name, but he's swearing falsely, which means that he is using it for nothing. So similar, I think, Thomas, that's similar to what you were saying. He thus desecrates God's name since nobody knows that he is lying. Okay.
So lots of ways to look at it. I mean, it can range from what you just said to any behavior that we engage in that is inconsistent with the teachings of Torah.
Yeah.
Could be a desecration as well. So.
Awesome. You know, and Jolie, I was stalling for time just to get your take on this. So in Mishnah 4, we're talking about anyone who desecrates. This is from Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. The second half of Mishnah 4, I don't know if you can see my mouse hovering, but it says, whoever desecrates and brings dishonor to God's name, even in a private small setting, will be punished for it in public. So Adrian was asking, and then it says desecrating God's name. It makes no difference if it's mistake or on purpose. God's name was dishonored. So Adrian was just trying to figure out, what does it mean desecrating God's name? Like, what is desecrating God's name? What is dishonoring God? So we were giving different comments on it. One of them we said was when a person cheats or steals, big or small, people see a Jew doing it and says, wow, that's how God's people act. God's name is desecrated by your negative behavior, or God's name could be sanctified when you're in Trader Joe's and you're giving back. Yeah, where was it? I was just in a store, and I gave back. They gave me less or more. I forgot. I was just in a store, and they were like, "You're a good man." I forgot where it was. It was a simple thing, but I don't know where. I don't know what I even had for dinner tonight. So I guess I'm not going to remember which store I was in yesterday. Anyway, maybe it'll come back to me. But it was just an interesting thing where
You're only 35.
$10.55. I bought something. Anyway, I don't remember anymore. But that's one way of understanding desecrating God's name, is if you steal or take more than. Another way, the way Thomas and Shira were saying, is using God's name for nothing. When you mention God's name and without the proper setting, which one of the commentaries is saying is swearing falsely. When you use God's name in an oath uncalled for, you're lying. Come back to you. If you have any other, yeah.
Julie will have the answer.
Oh, Adrian, were you going to talk? Were you about to say something?
That sounds like it's the opposite of Kiddush Hashem.
Yes, exactly. Kiddush Hashem would be when you're doing the right thing, you're sanctifying God's name. And the opposite would be, exactly.
Right.
Actually, Thomas, I don't have the answer, but I have.
Oh no.
I know. I'm so sorry. My wisdom fails me. We'll have to depend upon the rabbi. But I actually had a question, kind of a floating above sort of question, which was, I've heard this a lot. And it seems sort of like a scary admonition, when you're young, don't say anything bad, don't do anything bad because God sees you and you're going to be in trouble. And I think now, obviously, as an adult, I see this differently. But what I want to know, a very simple question, it's going to sound a little simple, Rabbi, I want to know, why does desecrating God's name, does it harm God? It says it was dishonored. What?
Why would God care? Like, does it affect God?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Don't mute yourself. Continue. Answer the question.
So, I mean, it's also, I understand, to do anything dishonorable dishonors yourself. And since we're made in the image of God, it dishonors what's divine about us. So I think anything that's anti-mitzvot dishonors what's divine about us. So I don't think it's a scary admonition from outer space. I guess that's it's just more of a practical internal reality. Like so many things from the Torah as an adult, I can see as a practical guidebook and not a mysterious, impossible goal to reach spiritually.
Beautiful. Yeah, Debbie, it looks like you have something to add.
Yeah, well, I think in answer to Jolie's question, uh, uh, my answer would be, well, why would you, first of all? And if you
Why would
did,
you
disrespect God.
Yeah, but
Disrespect.
here's unintentionally here. So
Right.
there's like a magical aspect to it that's of
Uh-huh.
concern.
So I guess, I don't know, when I think of it as being just respectful, number one. But then as I was listening to you, I'm thinking, why? I mean, usually if somebody is taking God's name in vain or swearing, they're on purpose, or, well, I don't know that you ever don't do it on purpose, but it's usually in anger. But I don't know, I just kind of feel like, why are you yelling at God? It's not like he did it, but I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with, I don't know. My answer, as soon as you asked the question, immediately came to mind. My answer was, well, why would you? And then, I don't know, to me, it's just respect.
I think part of it is also the reputation of the Jewish people, that when we desecrate God, it sets a bad example of who we are to the outside world as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's like that Bubby, that if the grandson is doing something unbecoming for the family, she's like, you're shaming the family name. The rest of the grandchildren will never. Shanda, exactly. Well, they'll never be able to get a shidduch after what you did. But I think this is more. It's like if you have a prince, he's expected to live up to a certain standard because he is representing the king.
Yeah.
But also, like, is it really desecrating? Does God really care, or are we supposed to care? Meaning, you're right, maybe it doesn't make a difference to God if it's done intentionally or not. It's like prayer. We need our prayer. We need to connect with God. And I think also with desecrating God's name, it's important for us, let's say even respecting our parents. It's the child that needs to respect the parents more than the parents needing the respect. It's like the children need to know that they're not buddies with their parents. There's a separation there. There's a respect there. And we need that reminder that we're not buddies with God, that we can't desecrate God. I don't know. There's a lot to think about there. And I like what Adrian said, and Debbie, there's a lot of good material there to ponder. Thank you, Jolie. Okay, let's see. Adrian, I think I have you up next on Mishnah 5. I'm just going to scroll from one page to the next in middle. So I'll let you start at the top and then I'll switch the pages.
Who did you call? I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian, if you're available. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I am. I just didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I'll try to speak louder. Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yosei says, someone who learns Torah in order to teach it to others is given the opportunity to both learn it and teach it. Someone who learns Torah in order to fulfill what he has learned is given the opportunity to learn Torah, teach it, guard himself from sin, and do what the Torah says.
And I'm sorry, Adrian, I'm going to pause you right there just because it's a pretty long Mishnah and there's so much else to talk about. But just this idea, I think this is so cool. This idea where a person could learn just to learn, and then it doesn't actually stick in their mind. They'll learn it, but it doesn't actually become one with them. When you have to teach it, you learn it much more, you personalize it a lot more because you have to give it over. So it becomes more one with you. But then he says, that's if you're learning in order to teach, then what was the expression? You're given the opportunity, you'll be successful to learn it and to teach it. But if you learn Torah with the intention of actually practicing it in order to fulfill what he's learning, then you're given opportunity to learn it, to teach it, to guard yourself from sin. It really becomes yours. And I think that's beautiful. It takes you to a whole new level when you're learning it, not just to learn it. You're learning it because you want to act on it. You want this to become one with you. You want this to become you. I like that.
Or own it.
Exactly. You want to own it. That's a perfect way of looking at it. Yeah. I'm sorry, Adrian. You can continue. Rabbi Tzadok, you're up to the fourth line.
Rabbi Tzadok says, do not separate yourself from the community. If you are judging a case, do not act as a lawyer by giving advice to those being judged. Do not make the Torah like a crown. Do not use it to make yourself great, and do not use it to earn money as a wood chopper uses an axe to earn a living by chopping wood. This is what Hillel would often say. Someone who uses the crown of Torah for his own benefit will be destroyed. You have learned from these words of Hillel that whoever seeks personal benefit from the words of Torah removes his life of reward from the world to come.
I got a problem with that.
Okay, so let's see which part. The idea where you shouldn't act as a judge when you're a lawyer. Don't help the litigants with coming up with their case. That's not your job. Don't give advice. And then, and especially, it's beautiful that it's coming from Hillel. Hillel himself, he would never benefit from Torah. He learned a lot of Torah. He taught a lot of Torah, but he had a side job that he wouldn't earn from his Torah teaching. Even I think teachers nowadays in observant schools, when they have to pay salaries to their teachers, officially the way they have it on contract is, I think, they get paid not for the Torah teachings. They get paid officially just because they want to follow this Mishnah for the discipline, for the other parts of their teaching other than Torah. But you don't want to get paid for Torah.
What about you?
Well, that's actually a good question. And hold on, I want to try to answer that. I don't know if I have a good answer to it, but even when I was younger, I used to learn the Torah on Shabbat in different synagogues, and it was my way. People getting through college, it didn't pay well, but it paid enough that I had some snacks that I was able to buy during the week in yeshiva, and I would walk, and I would walk actually from yeshiva. This was in LA. I would walk to Beverly Hills from like West Hollywood, and it was great. It was a beautiful walk in LA. I'm a Canadian boy, so I never took it for granted. I enjoyed every walk, but I made a couple dollars, and it helped me pay for some small yeshiva boy expenses. But they officially didn't pay me for laning on Shabbos, because you don't pay for anything you do on Shabbos. First of all, you shouldn't get paid for. And also because it's Torah. So they paid me officially for the practice that I would put into it, the time of practice, but not for the actual Torah reading, which is a similar idea. And there's beautiful stories of teachers of Torah, of Talmud, Hillel and Reb Huna. He was I think we mentioned this in a previous class. They would all not earn money from their Torah teaching. And actually, so Debbie, to answer the question, we officially don't get paid for teaching Torah. We get paid for other parts of our community growth that we do, but not for Torah. So let's say our summer camp, there's a tuition, or even Hebrew school teaching. The famous joke of the rabbi who he announces there's someone that comes and says, I want to learn Torah, and how much are lessons? And the rabbi says, Moses didn't charge for lessons. We don't charge for lessons. You want to learn Torah? It's free. So they sit down, and the lady is like ecstatic. This rabbi is like giving me time and not charging me. And they open up a Chumash, and he says to her, start reading. And she's like, oh, I don't know how to read Hebrew. So he's like, oh, you want Hebrew lessons? That's $200 an hour.
Rabbi, I'm not sure that this tractate 5, is that you call it a tractate?
Yeah, this one it's a chapter within the tractate. Yeah, that's
okay. Chapter 5. I'm not. It might be a deeper translation here. It's hard to say, but the first part says, "He who studies Torah in order to teach is given the opportunity to study and to teach, and he who studies in order to practice." This is in my fancy version.
Yeah,
is given the opportunity to study and to teach. So you're given the opportunity. There you go. And then it says to keep and to practice. Rabbi Tzadok said, do not separate yourself from the community.
Yeah, so far it's pretty close. Yeah.
Right. And do not act as a counselor. I'm not saying it's different. I'm just saying I'm hearing the whole chapter differently.
Got it.
And do not act as a counselor when sitting as a judge. Do not make the Torah a crown for self-aggrandizement. So far, what you do is none of those things. nor an axe with which to cut, obviously not. But then it says, so too Hillel used to say, and this is a little different. He who exploits the crown of Torah for his own ends shall perish. So exploits is interesting. And then he says, indeed, you have learned from this. Whoever derives personal gain from the words of Torah removes his life from the world, not from the world to come. So it is, I agree, it's very serious, and it's very important to not cheat with this, or not to try to, cover it up. But I think the definitions of teaching, opportunity to teach, that it's given to you, and I don't know that it's personal gain from the words. I don't know. It's a tough, I feel like it could be interpreted as using the Torah for bad ends, for saying I have some kind of power, or I'll give you something, or if you study, or something that's, if you derive personal gain. I don't know. Maybe I'm just over interpreting, but I just feel like there's a deeper meaning here.
No,
What a rabbi does is not that.
Interesting. So would it be, let's say, as a rabbi, I want to get out of a speeding ticket. I'm going to say, I'm a rabbi, like that's exploiting the, is that how you would understand it then, Joey? Like,
yeah, something cheesy.
Abusing.
Yeah.
Got it.
Exploiting is the word. Yeah.
Good. I like that. Thomas, do you agree with that?
Well, I had a thought a second ago, and then I realized I said something, and then we were muted. Now I forgot the thought. So
that's funny. I have it on recording, so maybe I could. I wouldn't be able.
No, I think it's an interesting thought that Jolie had, for sure. I mean, in terms
I like it, but I still need I need to use my rabbi status to get me out of a ticket next time. I don't know if I'm ready to.
Right.
It reminds me of the sophistry some people use to quote the Bible to serve their own ends, take it out of context.
Right. Yeah.
Or threaten, or ask for money in order to be covered in some way, to be protected in some way.
I like that. Okay, good. Thank you, Joey. And thank you, Adrian. One thing I want to correct myself, Joey. I told you it's a chapter. I misunderstood what you were asking, so my bad. This is actually called, it's chapter 4, so that's why I wasn't sure. But it's this is Mishnah 5. So these paragraphs are called Mishnahs.
Okay, so the big chunk is a chapter. The mini chunks are Mishnahs.
And the bigger chunk, meaning all 6 chapters together, is called a tractate.
Oh, okay, cool.
In
Thank you.
Hebrew, or a volume. In Hebrew, it's called a Masechta, is the a volume of Talmud. There you go. Okay, Mishnah 6.
But Pirkei avot's not Talmud.
You're right. That's another good question. It's the Mishnah. Talmud is a combination of the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah. This part just has the Mishnah, not the Talmud, not the Gemara part, but it is part of it's part of the tractates of Mishnah. Okay,
so Pirkei Avot is a giant Mishnah?
Pirkei Avot is a tractate. It's a mini tractate.
It's a mini tractate from within the Talmud.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's 63 volumes of Talmud, and this is one of them. But
this is the only one that covers ethics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few that doesn't have commentary of the Gemara, which is the commentary on this.
But is each number, like on today's class, is each number considered a Mishnah, separate Mishnah?
Yeah, like a 5 and 6 and 7. Yeah, these are each considered a separate Mishnah. But you're right, the whole thing is also called the Mishnah, right? It's in Hebrew, it's more the plural term of Mishnayot, which would mean like the plural terms of Mishnahs.
And is it called chapter 4 today, or is it, what do you call that?
Yeah, in Hebrew we call it a parak. We're up to parak Daled, or chapter 4, exactly. And actually, just beautiful. I'd like to dedicate this class, I meant to say it at the beginning, to Aviva Shane for her daughter. Her daughter lost her life in a car accident on Friday night, coming back from work at 8:40 p.m. This was in Lawrence, Kansas. And Aviva's such a wonderful lady in our community, and she lost her daughter. So we're dedicating this Torah study to her. Her name, her Jewish name is Amalia Bat Emet. And what's beautiful to learn Mishnah, it's actually customary to learn Mishnah in memory of a soul, because the Hebrew word Mishnah, which is what we're learning, is the same Hebrew letters for the word Neshama. Neshama means a soul, and it's the same 4 letters of a nun, shin, mem, hey, as Mishnah, which is mem, shin, nun, hey. The same letters, just a little. If you're dyslexic, you would understand what I'm saying, but it's just flipped around a little. Okay, Mishnah 6. Let's see, Marsha, Naomi, I would love for you to read.
Well, Rabbi, one more. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm in my fancy book. I'm seeing here that there is an interesting commentary, even though there's quote unquote no commentaries.
Yeah.
There's an interesting commentary on the is given the opportunity to study and to teach. It says, alternatively, if he is truly sincere and committed to teaching and raising the level of Jewish practice, the community should support him financially and give him the opportunity to be entirely free to do God's work. This is from the Nayot Baramah, cited by Knesset Israel.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so there you go.
All right, now I'm gonna get paid. I'm gonna get a raise. I'm gonna speak to the board. Beautiful. I like that. Thank you, Jolie. My salary is set for May then. Okay.
I just didn't want you to feel guilty, Rabbi.
A little bit of Jewish guilt is always healthy, right? Okay, Mrs. Berger, Mishnah 6, go for it.
Rabbi Yossi says, whoever brings honor to the Torah is himself honored by other people. Whoever brings disgrace to the Torah is himself disgraced by other people. Why is other and small is in a fainter word?
Good point.
I'm sorry, ask your question again, one more time.
The word other twice in this Mishnah is in a fainter type.
Yeah, because
why is that? Because it's an added word or what?
Yeah, meaning that's not actually in the Hebrew, so it's not a literal word in the Mishnah. It's just to help the flow of the Mishnah to understand it better. It just adds it in. Without it, it wouldn't really be so clear in who they're talking about.
Thank you.
And just a little bit about Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, who's the author, Rabbi Yossi, the author of this Mishnah. He was actually from a family of converts. He was from a descendant of Jethro. And he was actually one of the students of Rabbi Akiva. He was a tanner by trade, which is not an easy job, but he was also a great Talmid Chacham. He would receive visits from Elijah the prophet, and therefore he authored a sefer, a book called Seder Olam, which is a very studied book. It's a very known book, which is what he learned spiritually from Elijah the prophet, who passed away obviously around 1,000 years prior to this story. A Roman noblewoman once asked Rabbi Yossi, what does God do all day? What's he busy with? To which Rabbi Yossi responded, he makes matches. He's a matchmaker. He makes shidduchim, which is as difficult as the splitting of the sea. So hearing this, she replied, difficult? I can do it quite easy. That night, she matched up 1,000 of her servants to 1,000 of her maids. The next morning, they reported to her that not a single one of them was happy with their new spouse. Immediately, she called for Rabbi Yossi and said, I now see that it is indeed difficult, and your God is indeed very great. Okay, cool.
There's a very beloved rabbi. I think he was a Rebbe. Some people may have known him, Rabbi Yolis. And I remember that I think I heard it secondhand that he said, that's not hard for God to do, to split the sea.
Interesting. You're saying that making matches is.
That just the way it implies that somebody might think that when you say making a match is as hard as splitting the sea, well, for God, it's not, but I suppose for humans it is.
Right. Interesting. All right, let's go to Mishnah 7. Thank you. Vivian, are you there? We would love to hear you.
Okay.
Hi, Vivian.
Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, says, a judge who holds himself back from making a judgment and instead works out a compromise removes hatred from himself because both sides involved in the case are satisfied. He avoids accidentally causing theft through an incorrect ruling and avoids causing an unnecessary or false promise that might have been made had it proceeded to court. Someone who is too self-confident when issuing a ruling is a fool and a wicked, arrogant person.
Awesome. So I love the idea of compromise. And I think I've mentioned this before. Our mezuzah that we have on our front door is actually on a bend because there is one opinion in the Talmud that says it should be this way, another opinion that says it should be that way. So they compromise and have it slanted, which is the beauty of Judaism, where we're entering our Jewish home, reminding us that this is a home of compromise. So over here, it's better for a judge to come with a compromise. I think it actually continues. Oh, that's the end of Mishnah 7. Okay, cool. But the same person speaks in Mishnah 8. Jolie, did you read yet?
Sure. Excuse me. Rabbi Ishmael would often say, do not judge alone, because there are none who can judge alone besides one God. Even if you consider yourself greater than the other judges, do not say to them, accept my opinion. They are the majority, so they are not allowed to say that to you, but you may not say that to them. Oh, but they are allowed. They are the majority, so they are allowed to say that to you, but you may not say that to them.
Meaning they could tell you, you have to accept our opinion because we're the majority. So, and in Judaism, a Beit Din, which is a Jewish court, always has to have 3 judges. And you always have to follow the majority because the only single judge is God. I like that. So you shouldn't judge alone. I'm just going to see that footnote 2. I'm just curious to see what it has to say.
Sounds like democracy.
Yeah. Yeah,
early democracy.
I'm just going to read, you know what, Jolie, could you also read footnote 2 over here? It just comes along with, don't judge alone. So let's see what it says on it.
When we judge ourselves and our divine service, we should not do so alone because our self-love might prevent us from making an honest judgment. We should allow a friend to advise us and guide us.
So it's beautiful.
Like
it's such a Rebbe teaching because you would look at this Mishnah and you're like, nothing here for me. I'm not a judge. I don't have to deal with litigants. Or over here, the Rebbe saying, no, we're talking about judging ourselves. Sometimes you have to make an accountability and a spiritual stock taking. Where am I holding in my spiritual service? Where am I holding in my relationship with God? So he's saying that you shouldn't do that alone because sometimes your self-love will get the better of you and you won't make an honest judgment. So you need to have a friend. If you remember in chapter 1, we spoke about having a friend that can advise you, give you a bird's eye view, giving you a perspective that's outside of you, or give you critique when you need it. So you need a guide, and I think that's a beautiful thing from the Rebbe. Thank you for adding that in. All right, Mishnah 9. Did everyone have a chance to read? I think so. Okay, cool. So Mishnah 9, I'll take a turn. Rabbi Yonatan says, whoever fulfills the Torah even when he is poor will end up fulfilling the Torah when he is rich. So I think it's like a reward. You do your part even when things are tough. Hashem will reward you by being able to learn Torah. Going to mute you, Mrs. Berger. Okay. But whoever neglects Torah learning when he is rich will end up neglecting it when he is poor. That seems like a little bit of a threat. Like, just because you're rich, don't think that you have to put it on the side. Eventually, you're going to lose some of it. I'm just going to see. I'm sorry for scrolling up and down. I just want to see what it means when he is poor. I just want to see what Rebbe has to say on that. I'm just going to read it to everyone, Mishnah, the commentary here. Just put this out of the way. Here we go. One who learns Torah while considering himself poor in knowledge, will ultimately learn Torah out of wealth. His humility will lead him to succeed in his studies. Again, from the Rebbe, I think that's so beautiful. Poor doesn't just mean financially in your bank account. Poor means when you're feeling poor in your education of Torah, poor in your repertoire of mitzvahs. But he says, still go about it. And the Mishnah teaches us, you'll learn it with wealth. Your humility will lead him to succeed in his studies. I had a friend in yeshiva. His name was Yosef. He still calls me. He's a good guy. And in yeshiva, I felt so bad for him. He wasn't able to study well. Like, he worked so hard, but his mind, we would say in Yiddish, was verstopft. Like, he was just like clogged. Like, it just wasn't entering. He wasn't clear on things, but he would never give up. He would never let the teacher off the hook. If you remember, we learned in a previous Mishnah, I don't remember who read it, in a previous chapter, a previous week, that a shy person can't study, can't learn. And an angry person can't teach, because a teacher needs to be patient and a student needs to be I don't know if the word is brazen, but a little bit of chutzpah, that if you don't understand it, you speak up and you say, I'm going to understand it. So this student, he never gave up. He would tell the teacher, I don't understand it, and teach it again. And I thought, like, what are you doing, in my mind? And he is so much deeper in his Torah study. I would go to him, like even in yeshiva, he understood it so much better. He never gave up, and he was almost poor in his education. He didn't come from a solid background of Torah study, but he worked so hard, and he is the wealthy one in his Torah knowledge. Anyway, just I think of that when I read this, because it's actually stunning to see how true it is. Anyway, awesome. The Mishnah 10 is also a really nice one. Maybe we'll learn two, we'll squeeze in 2 or 3 more, and we'll call it a night. But Mishnah 10, this is from Rabbi Meir. I've been to his grave. Actually, his yard site was yesterday, Rabbi Meir. His yard site was yesterday, Monday, Sunday or Monday. Rabbi Meir was one of the greatest giants of Torah. I have to just tell you a story about Rabbi Meir. I probably told you the story before, but it's the coolest story. Till today, we talk to Rabbi Meir. We give charity to foundations that carry his name. And Rabbi Meir, do you remember I shared with you a heavy-duty story a few weeks ago about Rabbi Meir's father-in-law? His wife's name was Beruria, and her father was Rabbi Hanania ben Teradion, who was burnt by the Romans for studying Torah, with the Torah wrapped around him, with a wet sponge around his heart to prolong his suffering. Anyway, his son-in-law was Rabbi Meir. And after his father-in-law died, one of his sister-in-laws, his single sister-in-laws, was kidnapped by the Romans, and she was put into a human trafficking, was almost like in a harlot environment. Like she was being put in a house, and there was guards around it, and people would come and pay a certain amount and be let in, and it was terrible. And Beruria, who was her older sister, said, Reb Meir, you're like a miracle worker. Do something for my sister. Get her out of there. So he went, and he said, I could only help her. This is what he told his sister, told his wife. I could only help her if she is uncomfortable being there, if she wants out, if she's actually happy being there, which maybe some ladies were comfortable and happy with the money they were making, or pleasurable, then I can't help her. But if she's pure, if she hasn't been whatever, then I can help. So he went and he disguised himself to the guard in the front, and he says, here is a bag of money. I want so-and-so in your house. And the guard says, hold on 1 minute. He comes back and he says, she's not feeling well today. She's not available. So he realized that she would use that excuse for everyone, and that in fact, she didn't do anything. So he told the guard, the Roman non-Jewish guard, take the money for yourself and just give me the girl. And he says, what am I going to do with all the government? They're going to come after me. They're going to kill me. So he says, I have a trick for you. Whatever the Romans or the government will try to do, just use this word and you will be saved. Till today, friends, I use these words and I get saved. The words is, Reb Meir told it to him. It's in the Talmud, Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 17b. He says, use these words and you will be saved. The words are, answer me, the God of Meir, answer me. Aneni, Elokad Meir, Aneni. Use those words, and whatever comes your way, you will be saved from harm. He says, I don't believe you. That's crazy. So he says, try it. Reb Meir says, try it. So there was outside of this house, there was hungry dogs that they would use there as protection or guards, whatever, that no one runs away. So the guard took a clod of earth, threw it at the dog, steps at them, and the dogs came jumping at him to bite him. And as they're leaping, the Talmud says he uttered the words, answer me, the God of Meir, answer me. And the dogs fell to the ground and were licking his feet. So he realized that he was saved. So he gave her his sister-in-law, and the Romans came after the guard for accepting the bribe, and they were going to cut his head off. And he used these words, and the whole, I don't know, whatever he was locked up in got broken, and he was able to flee. And so till today, my mother, actually, I just asked her to find something in my house in Montreal that I needed a certain paper, and she couldn't find it. And then she gave charity to a foundation of Reb Meir, and she used those words, and she found it. She found it in a place she looked 5 times on Sunday. She couldn't find it. She gave charity on Monday morning, and she found it on Monday. Anyway, it's a cool little trick, but that's just about who a mayor is. And I don't know why I'm telling you the story, but that's the author of our next Mishnah. His name is Rameir. But Rameir says, minimize your business activities and occupy yourself with Torah learning. So it's interesting because before, Debbie, we were learning this idea where don't give up your business. Don't close the business and just study Torah. You need to make some, earn a living. But over here, you're saying earn a living, but don't do more than what you need to earn. Put away more and take out a book in the middle of your workday and study a little bit. Host a Torah class in your office. I like that one. Be humble before every person. That's a very important one. If you neglect Torah learning due to business matters, you will find many other excuses to neglect Torah learning. Wow. Whereas if you work very hard to learn Torah, despite any difficulties, there is much reward to be given to you. Beautiful. I don't know, like personally from Rameir, if he's talking about from experience where he went through hard times and he still pulled out the book to study. But we all know this, where you could always find an excuse to neglect Torah for the sake of business, or not even business. I mean, even just in my Jewish work that I do, my Torah work that I do, I could always find busy seasons where I study less because I'm more active in Rosh Hashanah or Pesach, busy seasons. He's saying, no, don't neglect your Torah study. Okay, we'll do one more. Does anyone want to read? I think we went through everyone, but if anyone wants to give it a second round,
I don't mind.
go for it. All right.
Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, someone who does one commandment gets one supporting angel for himself, who will speak good about him to God. And someone who transgresses one sin gets one accusing angel for himself, who will tell God about the sin. Repentance and good deeds protect against punishments. Rabbi Yochanan, yeah. The Sandler says, any gathering that is held for the sake of heaven will have a lasting effect, but any gathering that is not held for the sake of heaven will not have a lasting effect.
What does that mean, a gathering that's not for the sake of heaven? What is that? There's a lot of beautiful things in this Mishnah, but I guess just because you ended with that stands out. So you got a supporting angel, you have a accusing angel, God forbid. Repentance and good deeds protect against punishment. So it's tshuva and ma'asim tovim. That's a beautiful thing. But then a gathering that's not for the sake of heaven.
So all gatherings should have a spiritual element.
Oh, like you're saying, share some Torah at your next board meeting with your staff.
Well, in some way, yeah. I mean, I think I think whenever we're dealing with other people, like I have a meeting tomorrow with 2 managers, and they're, some of the things that we talk about and read about are things I integrate into how I handle's the wrong word, but how I interact with my staff. So there is in some ways a spiritual element and even those kinds of interactions. I as the boss have to find a way. I have to be humble. I have to find a way to connect. I have to take kind of a velvet glove approach to trying to get things done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But even then, there's an element that you have to be introspective to even make that work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I love
Yeah,
it. Thank
Thomas,
you,
I had kind of a realization was floating over my head as you said that. I really like what you said, because it seems like a simple statement that you would incorporate your Torah studies into dealing with business activities. They don't seem to really coincide, but in effect they do, because you can imbue these communications with what you, as you say, the velvet glove of understanding. And you can't be perfect, but you can certainly make an attempt to piece together all these teachings in a meeting. And I think that what the Mishnah says here is that in the end it will endure, and that's what you want for your business, your relationships. I don't think it means that it has to endure for eternity and be holy and glorious and perfect, but I think endurance is going to be created with that spiritual kindness.
In fact, I can't think of a better place to, I think our workplaces need this kind of stuff more than almost any other place.
Beautiful.
And one of my least favorite sayings, some people say sometimes, is don't take things personally. It's only business. To me, business is very, very personal. It's one of the most personal things that we do, because there are some real consequences to the decisions that we make. So having ethics and morals and being somewhat introspective is more important there than in many other places. And then we kind of reap what we sow. I think, I happen to be very blessed. I happen to know a lot of very good, honest, decent business people. But there certainly are a lot that aren't like that take a very short-term approach and a very brutal approach to business, which I happen to not like. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm just going to read from a commentary, a beautiful thing from the Rebbe, and then another one from another rabbi, and I guess we could call it a day there. I'll just stop sharing. So tell me if this resonates with you. An alliance of diverse individuals, like the assembly that we're speaking about here, will inevitably suffer from arguments and discord, for no two people are alike. What this one desires, the other hates. Each one feels that he should be in charge and that everyone should follow his view. They can only be united by a higher purpose, awe and love of God. If each one is focused on this agenda, each one will surrender to what is proper and will focus on the common good instead of his own benefit. That's from the Abar Benel, and it looks like the Rebbe adds on this, since it is their disparate intellects that divide them, they can only be united through a commitment to that which transcends intellect, which is godliness. I like that one. And then just one more, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who was a great, sharp scholar. I think he lived in the 1700s. He was known as the Yavitz. And he even wrote a version of the Siddur that we pray for. He says this in a beautiful way, but it says, and when assembly is for the sake of heaven, he actually understands that as talking about the Jewish people. The Jewish people are known as the assembly of the Jewish people in certain places. So he says in a book that he wrote called Lechem Shamayim, which means bread from the heaven, he writes like this: look and recognize what God has done for you. It is close to 2,000 years that you are exiled in a land not your own, yet your assembly, the Jewish people, has endured. How many ancient and awesome nations have disappeared from the world during this time?
That's right.
For falsehood has no legs, but you who cleave to the living God, God will not abandon his nation. He will once again have mercy on us. He will renew our days of old. So if we're following the ways of Hashem, we will be eternal. We will last forever. And you see it from others that weren't going in a direction or godly way. They came and left. They turned into matzah balls and hamantashen. Awesome. All right. So I think we made it. What do you say, Thomas?
I said, and on that note.
On that note, I'm getting hungry now.
I'm hungry.
All right. I think we made it through around half the chapter. So try to finish I'm happy to share the text with anyone if that's helpful. Shira, I'm trying to remember. Last week, I told you I was going to send you a link to something. I don't think I ended up doing it. Was it a link to the Pirkei that I'm using, like one of the copies?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'll do it right now before I forget after the class. B'ezrat Hashem, God willing. And if anyone has any questions, email me, call me. Otherwise, we have a Tanya class tomorrow morning at 9:30. Adina has a Torah and tea at 1 o'clock. We have a Lag BaOmer barbecue happening right here at Chabad parking lot, 6 p.m. Thursday evening. If you're under a certain height, you could even make it socially distanced on our moon bounce that we hope to have. One at a time.
There.
What do you say? I'll see you there.
There.
All right. Awesome. All right, everyone, have a good evening. Thanks for joining.
Will you send me that link?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Absolutely, Cheryl. I'll send it over. Yep.
Thank you.
All the
Thank
best.
you
Laila
very
Tov,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.